Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Each episode, you'll dive into conversations with top entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business leaders, unlocking the secrets to building profitable relationships that drive growth and success. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started. All right, we're live. Today, I have the con. I am Will Brooks. I'm your host today for Partnership for Profits, and we've got an awesome guest with an awesome name. Anyone named William can't go wrong. We've got the amazing William Vásquez with us today. William is an attorney is it Raleigh, North Carolina? That's where you are,
Raleigh.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you do immigration law, and do you do criminal defense, or do you just do immigration?
So we do immigration, criminal, personal injury, workers' comp, and family.
Oh, man. You guys do it all. All right. Very good. Well, you're not only an attorney, you're a U.S. Air Force veteran. So thank you for your service, first and foremost.
It's a pleasure.
Appreciate that very much so. So we're going to get into some questions you want to talk a little bit about your military background. Obviously, we're going to get a little bit about immigration and just kind of your journey from the military to kind of the tech world and then into law. You kind of run the gamut here, William. So let's start with your Air Force journey. Tell me how does a Spanish linguist for the DIA end up practicing law?
It's funny. The story goes something like this. When I was in the military, obviously, it was during the time that 9/11 happened. And,
okay.
My ex-wife was, I didn't know anything. I was a U.S. citizen. I didn't know anything about really immigration status or anything like that, but she was a legal permanent resident and had gotten in some trouble while she was as teenager. And after 9/11, obviously there were changes, and immigration tightened up, and she was placed in removal proceedings. I was stationed here at Pope Air Force Base in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And that's really kind of where it all started. I saw immigration pick up what was my wife. I remember going to the immigration because we did a change of venue. I was originally from Florida. We did a change of venue to North Carolina, and then one of those days we went to show up to report and check what's going on with the case. And that day they took her into custody and basically laughed in my face, and that started that whole journey. I was in uniform with my younger daughter, and I walked out, and there was an officer. I'll tell you, it's a pretty long story, but there was an officer that came around the building and actually gave me some paperwork that allowed us to reopen her case and actually helped us out. He didn't have to do that, but he did it, gave me that paperwork, and I hired a lawyer. And that started that process. Fast forward, eventually we were in court. The attorney that was representing the government, we got into a conversation. He told me he was part of Navy, and that lit up a light bulb in my head. I was like, if this guy could do it, I could do it. And and obviously based on the experience that I went through, I had a sour taste in my mouth because I was serving this country, and this country at that what I thought was ripping my family apart.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you were active duty military, and they were going to deport your wife.
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
It's the craziest thing. And they and not ICE themselves, but the contractors that hold the facilities where these ICE officers, they thought it was a joke. They thought it was the funniest thing ever. Mind you, I'm here, I'm like bawling. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Like, what am I gonna do? I had kids at home. I was still serving, on active duty. Like, I got to figure this out quick. Like, so it was crazy.
So you weren't deployed at that point?
No, I was here. I was here.
Imagine if you were deployed though, like if you were in Iraq or Afghanistan and that happened, like what are you supposed to do?
There would have been nothing. There would have been absolutely nothing, and
a blessing that you weren't deployed at that point. So
yeah, so we were able to find a good lawyer down in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia, and he was able to help us out. And eventually, she's fine. She's a U.S. citizen, blah blah blah. But we went through it, and had it not been for that officer that came out, I probably wouldn't be telling the story. But that's how I had no intention when I separated from the Air Force. I had an acceptance from law school, and I was actually separating with an offer from the CIA to go work for the CIA, and law school said, you know, and I said no to the CIA. I don't know, here I am. It would have been nice to be working in the embassies around the world and doing their networking, but here we are.
Okay. All right. That's a crazy story, man. So, and you have, you got a tech background too, right?
So yeah, so when I did my undergrad, I did it in computer science.
That's right.
So I was so
Now,
I'm
was
wow.
was undergrad before the military or after?
It was during the military.
In the military.
So
Okay.
I was even deployed. I was studying. I was going to school. Even while I was deployed and supporting Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan.
Wow, man, you've done a lot, man. So from like military to I'm guessing you used the computer science degree in the military. That's part of what you were doing, I'm guessing. Like it kind of was hand in hand.
No. The funny thing is that I decided to pick what I thought was something cool, and I was a munition system specialist. What does that mean? Basically, I put the bombs together in the missiles and the shaft and the flare for the planes, and we send it out so they could be loaded into the planes. And that was basically my job. So when I started looking, and I said, you know what, after I'm done in service, like, where am I gonna work? Like, American Airlines not gonna pick me up. Like, it doesn't translate to anything in the civilian world. So I had to figure it out. I had to go to school and find something, that I thought would have made sense. So I like computers. I like programming somewhat. So I did computer science, and then ended up in law school. um I don't know. But while I was in law school, I did the evening program, and what I did, I was a software developer by day and went to law school at night. I was already doing that in the military, so it wasn't really much of a shift for me because I'd been doing it while in service.
That's nuts. So okay, we're gonna pause real quick. We're still live, but you have flipped. I've got you. I'm looking at you. I'm having to turn my head like this to see. So let's see if we can fix the camera here real quick. Yeah. I think you're turning it the right way. This is the fun. This is the fun of going live. There we go. I got you back. All good. No worries. So tell me how your background in computer science and how does that like, and your background in the military, how does that influence your approach to your law practice?
Actually, I think it's given me somewhat of an advantage, because I'm very logical by nature. I think, in those if else statements, so I'm already kind of thinking like, if this happens, then I'm ready for this, and I go down that logic. And it's a little bit different than most attorneys. Most attorneys don't have a science, they have an arts. I did, poli sci, stuff like that. So it's a little bit different. I'll tell you, the first day I showed up to law school, um, the teacher asked for pictures. Everybody, she wanted pictures with the difference so she could kind of associate the names. And I didn't bring a picture. I wasn't ready. I didn't know what law school was about. Like, I had no idea. I just showed up. So I cut the picture. I was the first guy called. And that was my rough introduction into the Socratic method and trying to figure out what the heck this, professor wants to hear, So it was the longest 5 minutes of my life, but it's the difference in my way of thinking, because I'm very logical, and that, in that method, it's not, it's kind of like, let's go, let's chase this tail around kind of thing, So let's see where we go. But it's helped me a lot. It's helped me in setting up my office, obviously my network and all that stuff, and how I go about cases. We are knee deep, and I'm in the forefront of AI innovation and integrating AI into our practice. So it's helped me. Every part, everything has helped me. The military has helped me create some structure. So everything has come in hand and worked well for us.
Yeah, I got to imagine that it's your firm, and so you're in charge. So I got to imagine you're bringing some of that military discipline too. I mean, you're not looking for like it's not. I'm sure it's not quite at that level, but I got to imagine you're bringing that to the table as a leader, right?
Well, it helped me understand a lot of things, obviously going into the military and understanding that we're all working collectively towards one mission, one goal and stuff like that. So it's helped me kind of bring my team together and kind of focus them. And yeah, nobody in the office is marching, and we're not we're not doing none of that. So there's no rough backs, and we're not doing none of that. But it's helped me kind of lead the team, and bring them together and let them know, what to do, what the goal is, and what we're trying to do collectively. Yes.
I got a feeling marching would be like an HR issue in most offices. All right, so you've worked in the military. Real quick sidebar. I was reading your bio. You have a master's of divinity too.
Yeah.
Do you preach? Do you have a congregation?
I have. I have. I've been a licensed minister in North Carolina. I've been an associate pastor. I've preached. I've done awesome. That. Faith is it's a strong part of who I am. So God is front and centered in everything that I've done. I've been able to accomplish. I've worn many hats and I've done many things.
Yes, you have.
But it's been all through faith based. So
that's amazing. I love that. Yeah, I'm a lifelong PK here, and my mother's she's a retired now, but she's a ordained Methodist minister, and I was a kid when she was going through her master's of divinity at Emory in Atlanta, so I know what goes into that and how hard that is.
Yeah, so, I thought law school was hard.
Right.
Yeah, that was hard.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's amazing. So that's just another notch on the belt of the amazing things that you've accomplished.
Well, I got to this position where I got to one day talking to God, and God told me, I see your wall and I see all your titles, and when are you going to take some time to learn about me? And he threw me on this loop, and I ended up in Oklahoma at Oral Roberts, working and doing everything, and then going to do this. But it was so worth it,
Did you do that after you started practicing law, or was that before?
That was after. I was probably I was probably 8 years into practicing law, and doing a bunch of things, and here comes God, and okay,
yeah,
I hear you.
When you get the call, you have to answer, right?
Yeah.
The same thing, because I think she was working at a bank. She was a bank teller, and I came home and told my dad, I have to do this, and so he was like, okay, well, let's figure it out. And so she went to school, and 2 kids at the time. And one of the first female ordained ministers in the state of Georgia at that point in time, in the Methodist Church.
He does have a sense of humor.
You're right. I agree. Well, that's amazing. So that kind of leads me to my next question. So, and I'm going to add in the work in the church, military discipline, tech savvy logic, practicing law. Those are all kind of high pressure things, and different levels of pressure for different things, right? But what's the secret to adapting across so many different high pressure careers and areas of life? Like, how do you adapt to that? Like, do you just kind of carry one with you, or what's the secret to kind of juggling that?
Well, I mean, I was born in New York City, and things move rather quickly there.
Yes, they do.
So coming down to when I was stationed in North Carolina, I thought that things were moving a little bit slow. I felt like I was like one step ahead. Not that saying anything about anybody, but I was so used to this fast paced, and everybody was kind of enjoying life, while I was, not even thinking about it. So I've always been in this high stress, and even in the military. So it's kind of like becomes second nature. Like I'm always on the go. Like I'm always looking like what is there to do. And there's for me, there is nothing. I can't do anything, if I sit here and I stress out about a situation. I gotta come up with solutions, and that's what people pay me for. Is I have an issue, I need you to find a solution, and I need you to be level-headed. I can't, so I have to keep my head in the game, and me, being swayed or looking at this or being, influenced by this is going on, that is going on, or this is crappy, or this is that. That's not going to have me at my best for my clients. So I've kind of, the military being in Afghanistan and missiles coming in and coming in, and we were coming in, they were shooting the
Sure.
plane we were coming in, and it was backing side to side, flare was shooting off the sides, like, you got to deal with it, so
I guess that puts
it's
things into perspective too, where things that like I might consider to be the world's on fire. Like if I didn't serve, but when you've been through that, I guess the perspective is like, hey man, it could be a whole lot worse.
no, no, absolutely. And we could always have that perspective. We could say, this sucks, man, but there could be somebody next to us that, their situation is 100 times worse. And then it's all anchored, in my belief in God. Like I
Sure.
believe that, in His favor and whatever we do, that wherever we step into, we have His favor, and things are gonna work out.
I love that perspective. I love that perspective. Are you like a 24/7 guy? Like you're always on, or are you able to shut it off? I asked that question because you've met Armando, who and he is a 24/7 guy. Um,
I only have two speeds, brother. I have
yeah.
two speeds. It's either go or no go.
Okay. All
And
right.
when it's go all day long.
Right on. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, because I'm kind of the right hand for Armando here at our company, and yeah, he's a all the time guy, and I can't do that. Like I have to shut it off. That's just some of us are made up different than others, and I'm always curious to talk to people like that. Just like what is the drive to kind of just like you said, you're either going 100 or you're not going at all. There's no in between.
Yeah, no, everything that I do, I do it out of, just a passion behind it. I'm passionate about what I do.
Right.
I don't do anything that I'm not passionate about, because, I got to see it through. And those that are ever going to be successful have to be able to get through adversity. And how do you get through that adversity when things get bad, or things, so obstacles come? Is some of that passion will kind of pass you through, because you know what the end goal is. You just got to get past the hurdles. So I'm always full go, but what I do, I believe 100% that, in what I'm doing.
Awesome. So how do you translate that energy and that drive to your team? What are some of your strategies for getting your team to kind of be on that same wavelength and that same level?
Well, I mean, I'm also, I lead by example. So my team sees me. I ask them to do something, but I'm there doing it with them. And that's the way, I learned in the military, while I was a sergeant and I had, soldiers assigned under me. Like I was there in the trenches with them. I was there with them. And they know that, so they know that, and they know that we got their back. Like, it's that family. I don't want to sound like Fast and Furious here, but it truly is that mentality. Like we take care of each other, and we make sure that family comes first, and that we're taken care of, and they know it's real. It's transparent, it's real,
Right.
and it's also God centered. So everything we do it starts there.
Cool. Very cool, man. I love that. I love to hear that. I was going to ask you kind of what was the turning point in your life that kind of made you realize like this is the attorney I want to be, but I think you kind of addressed that at the beginning with the situation that happened when you were in the military with with your ex-wife and what happened there.
So I mean, I'll tell you, like, because it goes a little bit further than that. That was the little light bulb moment, but what I was able to see, and what left me a little bit with a sour taste in my mouth, was I was able to see the internal workings of what happens. Because you don't really know. Even me being in the military, I have no idea what happened. They
Right.
took somebody, they deported them. Okay, they deserved it. That's the opinion usually. But I was able to see how people were treated inhumanely. I could tell you that my ex-wife at the time had rheumatoid arthritis, and they refused to give her medicine, and she's just sitting there in bed she was there for 90 days, and she would go to the infirmary, and they would not give her medicine, they would not give her anything, they would just see her screaming, and her body's like,
Tight. Yeah. Locked
so
up.
yeah, so it was hard, and then, I thought, I'm like, well, hold on, I'm halfway around the world fighting, for the freedom of the Afghan people, Afghanis, and 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 this stuff is happening at home. Like, that left me, so I said, you know what, no, I mean, I'm I'm gonna do whatever I can, to make sure that that this is right, and just really just fuel that fire,
To
inside
keep
of
it
me.
from happening to other people. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's amazing. So let's get into immigration a little bit. It's a hot topic. There's that's probably a poor choice of words, but it's something that's on the minds of people a lot more than it has been in the last couple of years, I think. I mean, it's obviously during election season, it's a big topic of conversation, but things are happening on a national level as far as immigration laws, and I think there's a lot of people who are scared and worried about what might happen to them or their family members. So what can you talk to me a little bit about, William, about like what people need to be prepped for, or is it as bad as it's being made out to be? Like what's going on out there right now with regards to immigration?
it's actually worse than what people think. We have children that are being picked up. We have mothers that are being separated from their children. They're being sent to third countries, not even
Right.
their home countries. And they're doing it in the middle of the night. There's a disregard for the rule of law of what the courts say, and if the courts say something against what their policy or what they want to do, then they're criticizing the courts and stuff like that. So it's really crazy right now. The immigrant community, because it's just the whole immigrant community.
Hmm.
They're on pins and needles. Um, and the unfortunate part is that um, people that are even in court proceeding, that are showing up to court, um, but have been here less than 2 years, what they're doing is they're dismissing their cases in the immigration court and basically canceling their asylum applications, and then picking them up immediately right after, right as soon as they walk out that door. And one of the executive orders expanded expedited removal. Expedited removal means that they could be removed from the country without seeing a judge, or being allowed to present any sort of asylum and anything. They could just immediately remove them. It used to be, close to the border, and that was a law that was used close to the border. You just enter, we just remove you quick because you just entered. Well, they expanded that to up to 2 years. And now what they're doing is these people, they're closing. If you have less than 2 years, you go to court. You're basically being taken into custody and shipped, wherever. If you claim, if you claim you have a fear of returning to your home country, so let's say they grab a Venezuelan, because Venezuelans have been a hot topic. Let's
Right.
let's say Venezuela, and ICE takes them into custody and says, do you have a fear of returning to Venezuela? Well, he'll end up somewhere in Libya or somewhere, in Guatemala. Like, it's insane. It's against the Constitution. It's against who we are as a country. It's against what I came to know and defended this, as a soldier.
Right.
It's against everything that we are. Um, but that's what we have to deal with right now, and it's unfortunate because who's gonna heal, the wounds or that trauma that we are causing to these generations, future generations of U.S. citizens,
Yeah.
Who's going to heal those scars after all the damage and the carnage? Because it's not that we're going after the criminals. The
No.
criminals are being grabbed, but you're targeting, women, you're targeting children, and it doesn't really matter. And then the other question is, there's all these agents that are going around picking up people in civilian clothes. The heck are they? Are they even ICE
Absolutely is.
agents? Are they really ICE agents, or did we just hire a little mob for hire to pick up a bunch of people? Like they're not identifying themselves. They got their faces covered. Like, what's going on here? So
Yeah.
it's
So,
it's kind of
so
it's kind of crazy.
yeah, I mean, and I imagine you guys are probably very, very busy as well.
We are many calls, but um what we know as America is changing fast.
Yeah,
And
sure.
and
So what do
uh,
people do? Like, is there anything that immigrants can do to kind of protect themselves? Are there steps that they can take, or is it just kind of like watch out? Like, what are we looking at here?
So, I mean, obviously, you want to make sure that your documentation and your stuff's in order. I mean, that you've done everything you can. You know, in the event that they're going to take you into custody, they're going to take you into custody. So you have to file motions. You have to file appeals. You know, and you have to go through all these hurdles that under another administration you wouldn't have had, because there was some decency in the way we did things. You know,
Right.
but um, you have to be prepared for the worst. So you to prepare, have a package, at home, and in case of emergency, here's all my documentation, here's my stuff, it's a power of attorney, here's for the kids, and stuff like that. And all these, the whole community is just on edge, but there's not much, because you never know when they're going to do something, and
Right.
you never know when they're going to respect the rule of law, or are they going to give me, the opportunity to be heard, so am I going to get due process? You have all these things going on.
That's wild, man. That's crazy. Do you think there's been a lot of talk about like birthright citizenship going away? Do you see that as something that could potentially happen? Like, I feel like that's a really difficult thing to make happen. But I know that's something that a lot of people want to see happen. I think it's not a good idea, but what are your, like, where is that something that we think could happen, or what do you think? Or is like anything
Um,
can happen? Is that kind of where we are?
yeah, yeah,
I don't want to put you on the
the
spot.
Supreme Court has been good on some cases, but it's also kind of left some things open out there,
Right.
that you kind of scratch your head. I'm like, I understand, that the split, between the parties, but that would be something that would be devastating. It's not who we are, and that assertion that no other country does this or has that's absolutely false. There's a good list of countries that still have something like that. It's who we are. It's what
Yeah.
made us a great. It's what made us a great nation. We
That-
have the best of the best from everywhere. And
yes.
that's how we prospered.
I agree. I mean, I feel like that's something that's been has that been in place since the Constitution was written? Is that one of
It's
the original?
it's one of the amendments.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's written into it was written into the Constitution, and it's been challenged before, but it's crazy.
We're on a whole other level now. Yeah,
No, no, you know
yeah.
I
Okay, so I mean, thank you for kind of getting into that with me a little bit. I'm always curious to talk to other to immigration attorneys kind of about that. I have family that is I have family that's from Korea. I have family that's from Brazil. So they're not they're all by marriage, but they're still family. And so and the people that I work for are, I mean, they're Puerto Ricans, but Armando, he's from Puerto Rico, and his family, it's a family business. And I always worry about like targeting, and like, yeah, he's from Puerto Rico, he's American, like no question. Um, I always, and
well,
when
you should
are
you
you
should
getting targeted and pulled over and like thrown into a cell? Like, it's crazy to me. So
it's happening to U.S. citizens, so we got to be on the lookout, and they're looking to see if they could also deport some or send our citizens somewhere else. So be on the lookout for a lot of changes.
for sure. So what's the biggest misconception people have about immigrants and the legal system?
Well, I mean, they believe that every immigrant, does pay taxes. That's very common, or that every immigrant is criminal, or there's all these different misconceptions, and the reality, the fact of the matter is, that every immigrant pays taxes just like we do.
Sure.
Everyone, the difference is they don't get a return, but we get a return. They don't get a return. They contribute to Social Security. They contribute to every single little thing, so that's a common misconception. And the fact of the matter is that most of our industries, the workforce, is backed by immigrant. Most of our lower level, we're talking about agriculture, construction,
Yeah.
people that are doing our roads, the jobs nobody wants, the ones nobody, nobody, nobody wants out there. And most of the time, I can't tell you how many employers have come to me and told me, what can I do, for, XYZ, I want to help them out. They work, 14 hours a day, and they really make my business go. And half, 99% of the time, there's nothing that can be done. So we're kind of stuck, and It's we've become rich, and I'll talk about even at the highest level of,
The backs of immigrants.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, um, and they've they've made us better. They made us better. And every immigrant, because they come here with a purpose. They
With a
have to
dream.
start from zero. Yeah, they have to start from zero. They have to, there's a lot that they have to overcome. But now, along with that, humanity is humanity. We have criminals, we have good people, we have bad people, we have all that, and that's across any race. That's who we are as human. So it's not true, and most of these people live in the shadows and in fear.
Right. I hate that too. I absolutely hate that. Can you, without getting into specifics, obviously, but would love to hear about a case or a moment where you really felt the impact of your work in the immigration field.
So many situations, even till this day, we had a family, of a Argentinian family, business people, with several businesses and stuff like that. The son was involved at some point of time, with his ex-wife, and there was a domestic dispute and stuff like that. But he was a legal permanent resident, not a major issue, nothing like that. Come January 20th, he decides to travel. Drug goes to Argentina. He's since remarried, has children, stuff like that. Excellent, like this multiple business owners.
Right.
Travels and then gets taken in. He's taken into custody, and they put him in custody in such a way that we couldn't even ask an immigration judge for bond. So they allowed him to come in. Then we had to show up and report to their office to see what they were going to do, and they took him into custody immediately. Took him into custody, no questions asked. Took him into custody, and then we had to then, the arguments that they use, and that's a major problem that we're having, is that the allegations and what's being brought, there is no evidence behind it. There is nothing. It's just allegations, just to throw it out there. And that's what we got to fight against. So we had to break this down and really argue it. And we ended up winning the motion, and we ended up bonding him out. It took several weeks, and the family was the kids were crying, everybody was stressed, what's going to happen. But we were able to get him back out, with his family, and now we're preparing to keep, defending him. But this happens so often. Like, these stories happen, off and off, or off and on, because we deal with so many cases. And just to be able to see the relief, just the family, just to be able to breathe again,
Right.
It's just, it makes, it gives you the energy to wake up tomorrow and continue, even though things look so negative.
There's always a bright spot to be able to be found. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
All right, William, last question for you. We're going to talk about your legacy, deep stuff. I want to know what you want people to remember most about William Vásquez. What's the mark you want to leave? How do you want people to remember you? Not that you're leaving us anytime soon, but let's talk about legacy. Like, what do we want to leave behind?
Just want people to remember that, I honor God, and I fought, till the end, for every single person that came my way, and I did it to honor his name. And I want my children to be able to see that you could do things the right way. You don't have to lie, cheat, or anything like that. Believe in God and do things the right way, and love your neighbor, and do what's right, and do what we set out to do at the very beginning as a nation. um be that shining light. So if I ever want to be remembered as anything, it's just somebody that gave it all and gave honor to God.
That's awesome. Love it. What a great way to end this. This was an amazing conversation, William. Thank you so much for coming on. Love the back and forth here. Love getting to talk to you. Before we wrap it up here, let people know especially in North Carolina, like if they've got an issue, and I know it's not just immigration, but if they've got, any kind of legal issue, it sounds like pretty close, a lot of different types of issues. How do they find you? How do they find the firm? What's the best way to go about doing that?
Well, we're everywhere. So Vasquez Law Firm, you could find us on any social media. You can find us on our website. You could also call us at 1-844-HELP-VLF, or in Spanish, Yo Peleo, means I fight. And we are, we'll be there. If you need any help, you need anything, we'll be 100% transparent, and we'll be there with you, and we'll fight the good fight with you.
I love it. I love it, man. This was great. Again, thank you so much for coming on. Story's super inspiring. You kind of got me a little pumped up there at the end, talking about your legacy and how you want to be remembered. I think that's how we would all like to be remembered. So really good stuff. Appreciate you joining us today. Thank you out there for watching us today live. You can go back and watch this again on YouTube. It'll be up there. And we're going to have you back on, man. We can talk more about kind of what's going on.
Absolutely.
In the immigration world, and anything else you want to cover. We'd love to have you back on, but that's gonna do it for today. So again, thanks for watching. Thank you, William, for coming on here, and we will see you next time on Partnership for Profits.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.